Also tonight, a look at the vastly underreported story of slavery in the 21st century. Francis Bach spent 10 years in slavery in the Sudan and is now a powerful voice for millions of enslaved people through his work for the American Anti-Slavery Group. We're glad you've joined us. That's all coming up right now. Up next on this program, author and anti-slavery advocate Francis Bach. Stay with us. Francis Bach was just 7 years old and living in southern Sudan when he was abducted and forced into slavery. After 10 grueling years, he managed to escape, making his way to Egypt and then to the U.S. His remarkable story was the basis for his autobiography, Escape from Slavery. He now speaks around the country for his work with the American Anti-Slavery Group. Francis Bach, nice to have you on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure to meet you. I want to talk maybe a little bit later in the conversation, if we can, about what's happening in Sudan today and what your take is on what's happening in your country. But this story, your personal story, is so fascinating. I don't want to lose any time by not jumping straight to it. Take me back to being 7 and where the story begins that you're being abducted.
Well, the story began back in 1986. About this time, it is today 15 May of 2006, and I was captured 15 May of 1986 in my former country, Sudan. I remember that day, it was evening time. My mother came to me while we were playing with my brother and friends from the neighbor, and she asked me to go to the local market to sell the cooked eggs and peanuts. And that was my last time to see them, and heard from them. And we took a trip to a local market, and that day turned to become something else, that I were captured at that marketplace that my mother sent me to, and eventually spent 10 years in captivity with the Northern Sudanese Arab master who captured me at that local market and forced me to work for him for 10 years, from age 7 to 17.
So your mom sends you off to market to sell some eggs and peanuts to make money for the family.
Yes.
That's the last time you ever see your parents, your family, because you're abducted while you're at market.
Yes.
Who are these people who end up who are the folk who abducted you? Tell me more about them.
Well, who are these people? Well, Sudan is one of the largest countries in geography in Africa. Less population living there, but it's split two parts. It's south and the north, and south is where black Africans, Christian enemies live, and that's where I am from. And north of Sudan is Arabs, Muslims. And the Northern Sudanese, in the capital of Sudan, Khartoum, who dominate everything in that country, Sudan, had sent these militias, Arab militia. They armed them, the Sudanese government, and sending them to the south, in every state in the south, to kill the people and burn down the houses and steal the women and children into slavery. And these were Arab militia who were sent by the Sudanese government, who had captured me and kept me working as a slave, along with other many kids and women who were often abducted.
So over a 10-year period, you are enslaved doing what specifically?
Over 10 years, I served as a slave. My job were to take care of the cattle and do other domestic jobs. And it is real amazing to, when I flash back these days, and all the time that I served as a slave, to be a young person at home, and you're the first one to wake up in the morning and the last one to go to bed. And that was my life routine, doing the same job daily, job that I never got an appreciation or thank you from the master or the family member, job that I even get beaten. I didn't even do any mistake or made any mistake. I served there for 10 years, attending his goats and cows and camels and horses, and that was my job.
So over the 10-year period, you tried to escape 2 or 3 times unsuccessfully. Tell me about your escape attempts.
Well, my escape attempts, I decided to escape when I turned age of 14. This is after 7 years I served as a slave there, and I realized that it's not matter how long I will serve this master, or I realized also that I know they will never gonna take me back to my family, and they were never gonna treat me equally like they treat themselves or other human beings. But they were the people who totally have different belief in me and believe that they were better off than I, and they were using me, and they never allowed me to to really live my life as a human being, someone who really have dreams like them. But I decided to escape when I was 14, and my first attempt when I ran away early in the morning, because usually I'm the one who woke up in the morning to take the cows to the forest and taking them to the river to get water. And I left the cow nearby the house, and I was running in a direction that I didn't even know where I was going, and someone had saw me and brought me back, and I was threatened by my master that day after he beat me, telling me that if I attempt to escape again, he would kill me. But in my heart, I didn't give up. I said I would rather die than be a slave, and I escaped just 2 days, literally after the first attempt, and I failed my second attempt as well. And I could tell you, for those who might have ability to read my book, Escape from Slavery, the true story of my 10 years in captivity and my journey to freedom in America, you will come across the details of that day, the second attempt. Because that day I remember after my master beat me, he recaptured me back, and I was tied up, my hands and legs were tied behind me, and he grabbed his gun and pointed my head, saying that this is going to be a last day on the earth, today. And I thought he was going to shoot me. But with the miracle of God, he did not. I just closed my eyes while he was standing behind, in front of me, and I said, God, please don't let him kill me. I love my parents, and I have hope in the future. So he did not kill me that day, and then that's the time I realized I didn't have to rush to escape again. And I waited for 3 more years until when I turned 17 years old, that I finally made a decision that I'm not a little boy or 7 years old anymore. I'm a 17 years old man, and I can defend myself. And successfully, I was lucky to manage to freedom.
I'm sitting there listening to you, and I'm thinking, on your second attempt to escape, we're in the 90s now. Like, we're in the 1990s when you are a slave trying to escape to freedom. It puts it in context when you consider how recent this travesty was. What do you say to people who think that slavery, when we think, certainly here in the States where you live in Kansas now,
yes.
So you become accustomed to our ways here and the way we think here. When we think slavery here in the United States, we think Abraham Lincoln, we think Harriet Tubman, we think way back when. I don't think anybody thinks of slavery in a contemporary sense.
Well, this is something that I have learned. I was very shocked and surprised how a country like the United States, or wonderful people like this lucky people, the people of the United States are not aware of what had been going on in my country for over 2 decades. That cost us the life of 2 million, that we lost 2 million of our brother and sister in Southern Sudan. That doesn't include my family. And I was almost died in that situation as well. But I'm glad that I have managed to survive and escape, and eventually today speak about those days that I spent as a slave. So people here need to wake up. They need to realize that slavery is not history. They need to know that slavery is not ended. They need to learn that in 1996, if you invited me to come, I would have come here and be on your show, Mrs. Smiley. I was still struggling to get away that time in 1996. That's my last attempt that I was lucky enough to manage to escape, and eventually made it to the United States in 1999. I did not know even there's a country exists called United States, or a state exists called California, where I am today. So I was totally living in my own world, and today more people are still not aware of this situation. Contemporarily, there's estimate of 27 million people are still enslaved worldwide.
When did you learn what in fact had happened to your parents, and what did in fact happen to your parents while you were in slavery for 10 years?
I have not learned anything about my parents actually when I was there until literally when I came to the United States, and 2 years after I'd been in the United States in 2000. I have heard about my parents, and I have heard about other family members that they were killed in the same day that were captured back in 1986. And all this time, because there's no communications, there's no way to communicate with someone in Southern Sudan or Northern Sudan or any other part where our people had suffered to. Because we have all people run different directions. We have a lot of Sudanese people in Kenya, Ethiopia, and as well as Uganda and some other places, and even Cairo, Egypt, where I've been, for a year and a half, and then to United States. So I've never heard nothing until someone who worked with us, who's the director of CSI, Christian Solidarity International, it's a Christian organization based in Switzerland, had went to Sudan and met one of the distant cousins who had told him that my parents were killed in the same day because he went to my village. And that's when I heard about them. And I wasn't surprised because I met a lot of victims from the refugees camp in Khartoum and even in Egypt who lost their family and children.
You gave me some sense a moment ago of what it is that you do now, what it is that you're saying to people about the issue of slavery. So I have a sense, a better idea now of how you spend your life now, empowering people and enlightening people around this issue. Let me close by asking what your sense is of what's happening in your former country, your homeland today.
Well, today in Sudan, this thing are changing a little bit, and I'm very glad that we have really at least push ahead or have a static base to the victory to all Sudanese people. Today, things are changing a little bit in Sudan, as I said, because earlier last year in January of 2005, the Sudanese government and the South Sudan rebels in the south had signed a peace accord, and we were very excited about that. I should have said we are absolutely excited about it. I myself wasn't, because I remember when South Sudanese in Massachusetts, when I still lived there, were celebrating that peace agreements. I was asked to say something, and I said to them, I'm not going to speak because that peace doesn't guarantee the final victory for the all Sudanese, because it has been a peace agreement before in 1956.
Are you hopeful that this new round of peace agreements, though, will?
Well, now I hope, because we have people behind us. We hope the United States will, stay behind us to push this both party to really bring the final victory to all Sudanese, because we are tired of the war. The war has been going on for all this decade I mentioned, 20 years, over 20 years, and now there's new war going on in the same country, and I wasn't really agreeing with that peace as signed, because it can be peace in the same country while the war is going on in another part of the country, because in Darfur regions, or brother and sister, Darfurians are dying every day in the western Sudan.
Story has a happy ending for Francis Bach, given that he now lives in Kansas with his wife and his child, but again, so many still suffering in his region, in that region of the world. The book by Francis Bach is Escape from Slavery, the true story of my 10 years in captivity in my journey to freedom in America. Francis, thanks for the work you do, and glad to have you on the program.
Yes, actually I want to mention one thing. I want to thank the wonderful organization here in the LA area, and also I want to thank the Facing History. The organization had actually worked to bring me here, for this tour to speak out, as well as the Old States Foundation. This is the wonderful organization, doing a wonderful job, and I really want to thank them and acknowledge them, to the public, so they can support them, support their jobs. And I also invite those who want to know more about me or about Sudan to visit iabolish.com, the American Enslavement website.
You just did, and glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. That's our show for tonight. Catch me on the weekends on PRI, Public Radio International. Check your local listings. See you back here next time on PBS. Until then, good night from Los Angeles. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep the faith.
For more information on today's show, visit Tavis Smiley at pbs.org.